Thanks. Here's your lightly paraphrased version, with the structure, tone, and length preserved, and only minor changes to word order or phrasing as requested. For more than a century, the United States of America had depended on the brilliance of individuals to tackle its challenges. This approach was often messy, yet remarkably effective, driving the most significant economic boom in human history. But for Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States, the time had come to bring structure to that disorder. This would mean a reduction in personal freedoms, but ideally, it would also mean more equality throughout society. It was a trade-off that aligned perfectly with his progressive philosophy, that the government should play an active role in all areas of American life. During a remarkable first term, Wilson set the foundation for this transformation of America. Then, in his second term, he aimed to reshape the world. The First World War, which lasted from 1914 to 1918, gave him that chance. At first, Wilson did everything he could to keep the U.S. out of the conflict. In fact, it was his promise to avoid sending American troops overseas that helped him win re-election in 1916. Yet within 2 years, more than 2 million Americans would be serving in Europe, and over 100,000 of them would lose their lives. German hostility, especially through submarine attacks that killed hundreds of Americans, made neutrality increasingly untenable. The final tipping point came with the notorious Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany promised to support Mexico in reclaiming the American Southwest, if Mexico created trouble along the Rio Grande. On April 2, 1917, Wilson asked Congress to declare war. 4 days later, they gave him what he requested. If Wilson believed in a strong central government during peace, then even more so during war. To supercharge America's wartime response, he effectively took control of the U.S. economy. Entire industries were nationalized. Food and fuel were rationed. Prices were fixed, and the top income tax rate was raised to 77%. Civil liberties took a back seat. Criticism of the war was largely outlawed, with violators jailed under the Espionage and Sedition Acts of 1917 and 1918. German cultural influences were erased. Composers like Bach and Beethoven were banned. German language instruction was forbidden in schools, and sauerkraut was rebranded as Liberty cabbage. To his credit, Wilson left the actual fighting to his generals, and America helped shift the balance in favor of the Allies. By November 11, 1918, German forces, unable to withstand America's military and economic strength, agreed to a ceasefire. The fighting was over. Now came the question: what would peace look like? Wilson already had an answer: his 14 points. At the heart of these was his proposal for an international League of Nations. So devoted was Wilson to this idea that he traveled to Europe himself to oversee peace negotiations. Europeans welcomed him like a conquering hero, crowding the streets wherever he went. Wilson's instinct was to offer Germany fair and generous terms. He wanted what he famously called peace without victory. But the French and British, devastated by years of brutal warfare, wanted harsh punishment for Germany. Wilson disagreed, but ultimately gave in, believing it was a price worth paying to secure agreement on his League of Nations. While he won over the Europeans, Wilson failed to persuade his own Congress. Republicans and some Democrats were wary of the League's demand that member nations respond to aggression against any other member. They feared this could draw America into endless foreign wars. Wilson dismissed their concerns and made a direct appeal to the American people, convinced they would rally behind him if they fully understood the vision. But the cross-country speaking tour drained him completely. On October 2, 1919, he suffered a devastating stroke that left him partially paralyzed. Amazingly, the extent of Wilson's condition was kept secret, not only from the public, but even from his cabinet. For the last year and a half of his presidency, his wife Edith quietly made decisions in his name. Some historians have even called her the first female president of the United States. Had Wilson been willing to compromise with Senate Republicans, it's possible the League might have been ratified. But he wouldn't bend. In a sharp rebuke, the Senate rejected his vision, and in 1920, the American people delivered their own verdict, electing Republican Warren Harding in a landslide. They were finished with Wilson's brand of progressivism. Still, the defeat didn't mark the end of Wilson's ideas. His belief in an expansive government and a large federal bureaucracy would gain new momentum under another Democrat and Wilson's protege, Franklin Roosevelt.